Well, again, happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers here, and my hope is that today's message will be interesting and a blessing to you, and allow us to think and to think about motherhood and to celebrate motherhood, and that nothing that I will say will offend anybody, but hopefully just people will see my heart and the things that I believe in to be indeed my beliefs, and you can disagree with me, but I also hope that all of us will look to God for truth and for what is right and what is wrong, and that we can celebrate what is right. So one of the ladies in the video talked about how difficult it is to have two kids, and we have two kids, and we know that it's difficult. Who here knows Pastor Jeff Fletcher? It's one of your relatives, right? So he and his wife Karen, he's one of our fellow pastors in the States, and he and his wife Karen had 11 children. Sarah's mom and dad each had multiple siblings, over 10 each, right? And so I think about families like that, and I have no idea how they do it. Doesn't make any sense to me. How did they not have a nervous breakdown? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. So maybe one of you could explain to me if you guys have any insights about how people can have large families and not fall apart, because it's hard to have kids. And I would say this, there are many things that a woman can do, obviously, right? Many things a woman can do. But there's one thing a woman can do that a man can't do. What's that? Give birth to a child, right? Man can't do that, but a woman can. And again, to talk about our own experience, I've witnessed 2 births in my life. I was there in the room when Timothy and Jonathan were born, and I'll never forget the process that Sarah went through and how she got through it each time. It was really, really tough, but she got through it. And the whole process, really, of being pregnant was challenging, right? Sarah endured it. I hope she can hear this, right? Because I want to honor her and say that she did everything that she could to ensure that those boys grew in her womb and were delivered and were happy, healthy babies, and they were. And obviously there are circumstances in some people's lives where it's outside of their control, where something wrong happens, but we want to honor those who go through that process of carrying these children inside of them and giving birth to them. And I think Sarah and any other woman who's done that should take womanly pride in that. Is that fair to say? You can take womanly pride in being a mother and having given birth and carried a baby and given birth. And that's not to say women can't take pride in other things. Of course they can. Women can take pride in many things. But I would say the ability to produce and to carry and to give birth and to deliver brand new human beings into the world, I think should be at the top of the list, right? Maybe I'm not thinking of something that I should be thinking of, but that's pretty near top of the list, that you should be happy and very proud that you were able to do that. We, of course, everyone here and anyone who's ever existed, we owe our existence to our mothers, right? And I think society should exalt women for the fact that they can bear this responsibility and do bear this responsibility. They should be praised for it, and we should put them on a pedestal for it, if you will. Now, I do want to be very clear that some women never marry for one reason or another, okay? And other women are unable to have children. That's a fact, that's reality, and I have deep sympathy for people who never marry or who never have children or can't have children. And I want you to know that you are not less of a woman if you don't have children, right? If you're a woman and you don't have children, that does not make you less of a person, right? You are wonderful aunties to children, you're wonderful friends to children, right? You can't be replaced. So I want to recognize you as well. But let's also recognize the women who have had children and who have embraced motherhood, right? Now, I say this, and if you're on Twitter or other places, especially with the news of what happened this past week in the United States with the Supreme Court, there was a leak or a rumor that the Supreme Court, the majority of the Supreme Court is going to overturn the Roe v. Wade case, which made abortion legal. And so they're seeking to overturn that so that it can go back to the states, and the states can decide for themselves on that issue. And so when you are online and you're watching these discussions happen about that topic, you can really see that there are some people, and some women in particular, who view motherhood with disdain, right? They view it in a negative light. And I have a few quotes here, and I only share these just to give you a little glimpse into what some people are saying. The organization from the UN Women, tweeted out and they said, "Not every woman can afford the penalty of motherhood." And I get what they're saying. They're saying not every woman is in a position to take on pregnancy and to have the resources to deal with it. I get that. I have sympathy for that. But why would you call it a penalty? Right? It's not a penalty, but they're calling it a penalty of motherhood. Then there is somebody who was a feminist back in, I think, the 70s or 80s, something like a second wave feminist, not the original feminists of the early 20th century, but a later feminist said, her name is Shulamith Firestone, I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it. She said, the heart of woman's oppression is her childbearing and childbearing roles. That's the heart of a woman's oppression, is childbearing and her role as a childbearer. And lastly, there's an author who has been featured in major newspapers, but in a sense, he's just some random guy, but he does represent the view of many, or at least of some, where he said that being a mother is akin to being a slave. He said, you must sacrifice every waking moment to it, or you'd be considered a failure. And it goes on until you're in your 40s, and so much of your life is then behind you. You have essentially zero ability to exit the contract once you've entered it. So being a mother is slavery, and the things that he's saying here are not wrong. Like, yes, you do sacrifice basically every moment to being a mother. And you are into your 40s before you can have some kind of break, if you will, and then much of your life is behind you, and you have no ability to exit the contract once you've entered it. But wow, talk about looking at the same experience or the same issue and looking at it with a different perspective than another person. One person would see it as, yes, every second of the day, I'm consumed with taking care of our children, right? That's what a mother could say. And say, but who else would? I wouldn't trade that for the world, right? I want to be the one who takes care of them. And yeah, I'm going to be into my 40s before they're starting to grow up. But that's not much of my life is behind me in the sense of like, what a waste. It's like more like I got to spend all those years with them, right? And yeah, there is no way to exit the contract once you've entered it, because that's sort of the nature of parenthood. Once you become a parent, then you're a parent, Well, and this is the part of my message that, I'm not happy to speak about, and I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but it is the topic that in and of itself will make us all feel uncomfortable. Because if we want to talk about exiting motherhood once you've entered it, there is something called abortion, right? And like I said, abortion is currently the top news item with what happened with the Supreme Court this week, possibly making abortion no longer legal in the United States, or at least on a federal level. And so many people today have taken that opportunity to, this is a fresh opportunity for people to express their views. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking this opportunity to express my view. But I want to give you the other side first, right? Many people today believe that should be a woman's choice whether or not to have an abortion. In fact, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died a couple of years ago in 2020, she was previously on the Supreme Court, and she was in fact the first woman to be appointed to the Supreme Court in the United States. And she said the decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. It is a decision she must make for herself. I think that fairly, I think that if we're being fair, that represents what many people who are, quote, pro-choice, how they would characterize the issue, right? That they would say that it's the woman's body, and therefore it's her choice to decide what happens to her body. And most of you know this, I'm a libertarian. My political views are libertarian, which means that when it comes to the law, I'm not talking about morality, I'm talking about the law as a way to prevent people from doing things or to discourage people from doing things. I think that every person should be free to do whatever they want with their body as long as it doesn't hurt other people or infringe on the rights of others. As long as people are able to live their lives, have their freedom, and own their property, as long as they don't interfere with each other in those ways, people should be free to do whatever they want. I might personally have an opinion about what they should or shouldn't do, but as it relates to the law, people should be free to do whatever they want. That's the basis of Western society, certainly American society, but even here in Canada and other countries, we believe in freedom. We believe people should be able to live however they want, right? Whether or not you fully agree with that, here's the point. Before the conception of a child, I wholeheartedly agree with the point that Ginsburg's making here, that the choice, right, the decision whether or not to bear a child is central, is a huge decision in a woman's life. Your life completely changes once you get pregnant and have children, right? And it has to do with her well-being and with her dignity. And it's a decision she must make for herself. I wholeheartedly agree with that before conception. No woman should ever be forced into having a child, into getting pregnant, right? No woman should be put into a situation where she gets pregnant against her will, right? What a terrible situation that would be if, let's say, they were married and she didn't want to get pregnant, but the husband, persuades her or even forces himself. What a terrible crime that is, right? No woman should have to be forced into getting pregnant, right? It should be their free choice. I'm pro-choice when it comes to whether or not woman chooses to get pregnant. But I don't think Ginsburg and many people who share that opinion are talking about before conception. I think they're talking about after conception, right? Most people who are pro-choice are not talking about whether or not a woman should choose to get pregnant. That is obvious. I think they all agree with that. It should be a woman's choice. But they're also saying after conception, it should still be the woman's choice whether or not they stay pregnant. I just want you to know, if you were curious, that I am unabashedly pro-life. I've thought about this issue for many, many years, especially when I became a libertarian about over 10 years ago. I said, hey, I'm putting everything on the table. I want to rethink all of my assumptions, including the abortion issue. There are lots of well-meaning people who are pro-choice, and I wanted to understand their perspective, right? I think that's only fair when you're trying to understand the world and understand what you believe. You look to the people that you, I guess, disagree with, or perhaps has a different view, and you say, I'd like to try to understand what they think and why they believe what they believe. I thought about it for many years and researched it, and I can find no scientific evidence that a fetus is anything but a different person from the mother. It's a different person. There's no scientific evidence that a fetus is not its own person. And that's from conception. From conception, a fetus has its own DNA. It's an amalgamation of the mother and the father, right? It's not the same body as the woman. And so there's a famous quote attributed to a Christian author named Greg Koki, I think his last name is. Koki, anyway. The quote is this, you may have heard of it before. If the unborn is not a human person, then no justification for abortion is necessary. However, if the unborn is a human person, then no justification for abortion is adequate. Do you catch that? See what he's saying there? If the fetus is not really a person, then who cares? People can choose to chop off their arm. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's their body and they can do what they want, right? My body, my choice. I believe that. I think anybody who thinks deeply about how a society should be run in terms of having a free society, people should be able to do even weird things to their body, even things that you wouldn't agree with. They should have that freedom. But the fetus is not a different person. And so therefore, there is no justification for it. And listen, I have deep sympathy for women who have been impregnated through rape, or women who are in terrible positions in their lives and they got pregnant, or similar situations like that. I have deep sympathy for women who are experiencing a challenging pregnancy, or an unwanted pregnancy, if you will. But that's not the overall attitude of people who are pro-choice, right? The overall attitude of people who are pro-choice is that regardless of the situation, a woman should be free to choose whether or not to abort the child. And all I can say is I can try to make a logical argument, I can try to make any kind of scientific or spiritual argument. Arguments don't really change people's minds, sad to say. So I simply bow my head in prayer and I say, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they are doing." That's the only thing that I can do, because I think about all of the children who never had a chance, and I think about my own boys, about how I was there with Sarah every step of the way, and I saw them growing inside of her, and now they're out, and I can't even imagine, I don't want to imagine, that there was the option to do something to them so that they wouldn't exist. I tend to think that the people who are pro-choice, maybe, I don't understand it. It's like some of them have children. I don't understand how they could have children and have that view. Change my mind if you can. If you have, I don't know about anybody here, but if anybody's watching online, I don't understand that view. But the person who is a mother, right? I mourn for the people who think being a mother is a curse or is a problem that needs solving. And again, I don't want to minimize that it is very challenging getting pregnant and becoming a mother and being a faithful mother, very challenging. But it's also incredibly rewarding, right? Bringing new life into the world, right? Feeling that baby growing inside of you. And as that happens, guess what happens? The love of a mother grows inside at the same time, just as that baby is growing. And then you see the child being given life in terms of being birthed. They are now in the world. And you actually see this manifestation, this brand new person who wasn't here before is now here in the world. And the love of a mother is manifested, right? So I want to pray for all those who don't think that that's one of life's most powerful and wonderful experiences, something that should be welcomed. And the love of a mother doesn't end there. And I want you to think about this. No matter what age your children are, the love of a mother doesn't end there. Because you then have the opportunity from the time that they are born all the way to the end of their lives, right? Or the end of your life, I guess, to be a mother to them, to love them, to guide them in life, right? Because women not only have the incredible privilege of being the ones who bring these new people into the world, they also share the responsibility, of course, with the father to nurture these little humans and help them to become good people, righteous people, people of God, right? Obviously, we know Proverbs 31. If you haven't read Proverbs 31, starting in verse 10, do yourself a favor and read that. It's all about how great women can be for God and for family. She says, "She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue." The wisdom, of course, in Proverbs, especially in the context of Proverbs, is talking about Torah. It's talking about God's ways. She's a teacher of Torah. She's a teacher of the Bible. In fact, literally, teaching of kindness is Torat Chesed, which means teaching, or Torah, of kindness is not the best translation. It means devotion. It means like being faithful. How to be faithful to God is on her tongue, to her children and to her family, right? So think about that. A person's first and primary teacher of the Bible and of God's ways is a mother, right? A mother shapes the life of their child. Of course, when the child grows up, he has a choice. The child has a choice. So if your child went a different way, it's not necessarily your fault because the child has a choice. But you have possibly the best influence upon your child. And we read about the influence that women had on Timothy, Paul's student, if you will, Paul's mentee. Paul was a mentor to Timothy. And he wrote to Timothy and he said, "You share the faith that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. And I know that same faith continues strong in you." We don't know Timothy's life situation other than his father was Greek and his mother was Jewish. His mother and grandmother was Jewish. And so they were the ones who taught him to be a believer in God. And he became a follower of Jesus and a protege to Paul. It was the influence of women in his life, mothers in his life, that led him down a path that allowed him to choose to be faithful to God. So I say, what a privilege, right? What a privilege it is to be a mother, to be a woman who is a good influence on young people and on everybody in our lives. So, tough sermon, tough message, but I felt, especially with what's going on in the world, that I at least needed to get my point of view across. But I hope it makes sense, and I hope it's something that we can, on one hand, mourn over, but also pray for and be a force for good about as well. Paul, come on up. We're going to sing a song that points us to the ultimate parent. You know, we call God Father, right? But he is the ultimate parent. He has he expresses to us the love of a father, and we're going to look at that next month on Father's Day. But guess what? Even though we call him Father, he's not literally male or female, so he also expresses to us the love of a mother. You can go to God to get refilled, if you will, when it comes to the love that we can express to others. And so we sing the song, "We are no longer slaves to fear, because we are children of God." Again, the ultimate parent.